The September air felt crisp against my skin as I hung the last string of fairy lights across our backyard oak tree. Our modest suburban Boston home looked magical tonight, exactly as I had envisioned for our first anniversary celebration. A year of marriage to James deserved nothing less than perfection. "Emma, where do you want these platters?" My sister Olivia called from the kitchen, her arms loaded with the catering I'd splurged on after weeks of saving. "On the table near the grill, please," I replied, climbing down the ladder to admire my handiwork. The backyard transformation had taken days. White linen tablecloths covered rented tables, each centerpiece a simple mason jar filled with wildflowers from our garden. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, casting a warm glow that softened the approaching evening. A small wooden platform served as our makeshift stage for toasts and the anniversary cake, a 3-tier vanilla creation with buttercream, roses that had cost more than I'd care to admit to James. Everything had to be perfect, not just for us, but for her, for Diane, my mother-in-law, whose approval I'd been chasing since the day James introduced us 3 years ago. "She's just protective," James always said, the standard defense when I'd try to explain how her subtle jabs felt more like daggers. Dad's passing hit her hard. She's afraid of losing me too. I understood grief. I respected it. What I couldn't reconcile was how grief manifested as constant criticism of everything from my career choices. Teaching doesn't exactly scream ambition, does it? To my cooking. James grew up on home-cooked meals, not whatever this experiment is. My phone buzzed in my pocket. James. "Hey, almost home. Mom just texted. She's running late. Big surprise, right?" I forced a laugh. "Take your time. Everything's ready here." Diane's lateness was strategic, I'd come to learn. Grand entrances were her specialty, ensuring all eyes shifted her way. I couldn't complain today, though. The extra time meant I could double-check the seating arrangements, keeping her separated from my college friends, whose liberal views had sparked more than one uncomfortable dinner conversation. By 7, our backyard hummed with conversation. 30 of our closest friends and family members mingled, while acoustic covers of our favorite songs played softly through rented speakers. My parents chatted with James's college roommates. My former students, now in high school, helped serve appetizers for extra pocket money. "There she is," James's voice carried across the yard as he waved towards the side gate. "Mom's here." The conversations didn't stop, but they quieted. Like actors aware a new character had entered the scene, everyone subtly shifted their attention. Diane Morgan didn't just wear a red dress, she commanded it. At 62, she maintained the posture of someone perpetually ready for a photograph. Her silver-streaked hair swept into an elegant updo that made my own hastily curled locks feel childish by comparison. "Happy anniversary to my darling boy," she announced, bypassing me to embrace James. Her perfume, something expensive and French, enveloped them both. And to Emma, of course. The afterthought wasn't subtle. James beamed obliviously. "You look amazing, Mom." This old thing. I almost went with the blue, but red felt more celebratory. She turned to me, eyes scanning my cream-colored cocktail dress. "Emma, dear, you look comfortable." I swallowed the retort rising in my throat. 1 year of marriage, 1 evening of peace. That's all I needed. "Thank you for coming, Diane. Can I get you some wine? We have that Cabernet you liked at Christmas." "Thoughtful of you to remember." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'll mingle first. So many people I haven't seen since the wedding." As she glided away, James squeezed my hand. "See? She remembered the wine you served. Progress." I nodded, not having the heart to tell him I'd specifically bought it because it was the only thing she hadn't criticized during holiday dinner. The evening progressed smoothly at first. We shared a meal under the stars, friends offering toasts that made us laugh and occasionally tear up. My father, never one for public speaking, surprised everyone with a heartfelt speech about watching his daughter find true partnership. To James and Emma, he concluded, raising his glass. May your worst days together be better than your best. Days apart. Everyone clinked glasses. Everyone except Diane, who was busy typing on her phone. Mom, James whispered, nudging her. Toast? Oh. She looked up, feigning surprise. I was just confirming tomorrow's charity luncheon. The committee simply falls apart without direction. She raised her glass with a flourish. To my son and his wife. 1 year down, many to go. The chill in her words wasn't lost on me, but I smiled anyway, taking a long sip of champagne to mask my discomfort. After dinner, as guests broke into smaller conversation groups, Diane cornered me by the dessert table. Quite the production you've put together, she said, eyeing the professionally printed menus. James mentioned you two were trying to save for a down payment on a real house. I hope this little party didn't set that back too much. We're doing fine, Diane. I arranged cake plates with more force than necessary. And we love our house. It's a starter home, Emma. Surely you don't expect my son to raise children in a place with only one bathroom? Before I could respond, James appeared, wrapping his arm around my waist. Everything okay over here? Just girl talk, Diane said smoothly. When are you doing the cake? Some of us have early mornings tomorrow. James checked his watch. Actually, now's perfect. Emma planned a little slideshow first, then cake. I'd spent weeks gathering photos for the slideshow. Our first date at Fenway Park, hiking in the White Mountains, the surprise proposal at the MFA, and scenes from our wedding at James's family church. Stories of our life together, set to the song from our first dance. As the projector flickered to life against the side of our house, I watched Diane's face. For a moment, just a moment, something like genuine emotion crossed her features as images of her son's happiness played out before her. When a photo appeared of James as a child, holding his father's hand at a Red Sox game, I heard her quick intake of breath. Maybe there was hope after all. Maybe tonight would be the turning point, the beginning of a real relationship between us. Then I noticed her typing on her phone again. Whatever momentary connection I'd imagined was gone, replaced by the familiar wall of indifference. As the slideshow ended to applause, James pulled me close for a kiss. Best year of my life, he whispered against my lips. And despite everything, despite the tension, the critical comments, the constant feeling of being measured and found wanting, I meant it when I whispered back, mine too. Little did I know how quickly one perfect moment could shatter. The night air had grown cooler, and someone, probably my thoughtful cousin Beth, had started lighting the outdoor heaters. I was collecting empty glasses when our friend Mike clinked, his fork against his champagne flute. Time for more toasts, he announced. Who hasn't spoken yet? I glanced toward James, who was deep in conversation with his old roommate Tyler. My husband looked so handsome in the amber glow of the string lights, his face animated as he laughed at something Tyler said. This night had turned out even better than I'd hoped. I'd like to say something, came a voice that instantly made my shoulders tense. Diane stood up, smoothing her red dress as all eyes turned to her. I forced a smile, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, she would surprise me with something kind. After all, she'd been relatively subdued throughout dinner, only making 3 passive-aggressive comments about my choice of caterer. Could someone pass Diane the microphone? I asked, keeping my voice light. Our friend Raj, who had been acting as unofficial MC, handed it to her with a flourish. Diane took center stage. On our little wooden platform, the spotlight created by the crossing of 2 string lights seeming to find her automatically, the chatter died down as people settled into their seats, wine glasses in hand, expressions expectant. For those who don't know me, she began, though everyone did, I'm James's mother, Diane Morgan. Some of you have known my son since he was just a boy with skinned knees and big dreams. A few of James's childhood friends nodded, smiling nostalgically. I raised him alone after his father died, she continued, a fact she never failed to mention at every gathering. It wasn't easy being both mother and father to a growing boy, but I made sacrifices. I put aside my own career in interior design to make sure he had everything he needed. James caught my eye from across the yard, his expression a familiar mix of affection and mild embarrassment. I gave him a reassuring smile. When James told me he was dating a schoolteacher from Somerville, I'll admit I had my reservations. Diane paused dramatically, scanning the crowd. Emma came from a different background than what I'd envisioned for my son. Her people are... She waved her hand vaguely. Lovely, of course, but simple. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My mother placed a calming hand on his arm. But love is love, isn't it? Diane continued with a tight smile. And now here we are, celebrating a whole year of marriage, a year in which my son has worked tirelessly at the firm while Emma has... She paused again, taught children about dinosaurs and played house in this charming little starter home. I felt heat rising to my cheeks. My 4th grade curriculum was focused on state history and environmental science, not dinosaurs, but correcting her seemed pointless. Speaking of this house, Diane's voice took on a strange edge that made something twist in my stomach. I've been thinking a lot about family legacy lately, about what we pass down to the next generation. James had made his way to my side now, his hand finding mine as if sensing my discomfort. "Mom," he said quietly, "maybe we should cut the cake." Diane ignored him, her gaze focused somewhere beyond our gathered friends and family. "Did you know that the Morgan family used to own 3 properties in Cambridge? Prime real estate, all lost when my husband's business partner swindled him. We had to start over with nothing." An uncomfortable silence fell over the backyard. This was ancient history, from before James was even born, but Diane spoke about it as if the wound were fresh. All I've ever wanted was to rebuild what was taken from us, to secure my son's future. Her voice grew louder, more insistent. "And now I need your help, Emma." "My help?" I echoed weakly, not understanding where this was going. "Yes, your help." Diane's eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me want to step back. "If you truly love my son, if you truly want to be part of the Morgan family, you'll do what's right." James's grip on my hand tightened. "Mom, I think you've had enough champagne. I'm perfectly clear-headed, James," she snapped. Then, her voice rising to reach everyone in our backyard, she made her demand. "Emma should sign over this house to me. The full $400,000 property. It's the least she could do for everything I've sacrificed for you." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the distant traffic noise seemed to have paused in shock. "What?" James finally managed. "You heard me." Diane's voice was steady, confident, as if she were making the most reasonable request in the world. "This house should be in the Morgan family name. I've already spoken to my lawyer. The paperwork can be drawn up next week." I felt dizzy, like the ground beneath me had suddenly shifted. "Diane, this house is in both our names. We bought it together." "Did you?" Because I seem to recall James mentioning that you had it before you met, that you insisted on keeping the deed in your name only. All eyes turned to me. It was true. I had bought the house with my inheritance from my grandmother 2 years before meeting James. We'd decided to keep it in my name for now, as James was still paying off student loans, and we didn't want the house factored into his debt calculations. "That's not..." I started, but Diane cut me off. "Don't deny it, Emma. You've been squirreling away your assets from day one. What kind of wife does that? What kind of daughter-in-law refuses to help secure her husband's family legacy?" James dropped my hand and stepped forward. "Mom, stop this. Now." "I'm only saying what everyone is thinking," Diane insisted, her voice rising, that Emma has never truly committed to this family, that she's always had one foot out the door. Tears pricked at my eyes as I looked around at our guests. Most stared at their shoes or wine glasses, too uncomfortable to meet my gaze. My parents looked stricken, my father half risen from his seat as if ready to intervene. "All I'm asking," Diane continued, softening her tone to something almost reasonable, "is for Emma to prove her commitment, to show that she values family above material possessions. By giving you our house." I found my voice at last, disbelief making it shake. "The house where we're building our life together?" "It's an investment in family," she insisted. "In the future, in you," I interrupted. "Not in us, in you." Diane's expression hardened. "Always the victim, aren't you, Emma? Always painting me as the villain when all I want is what's best for my son." From the corner of my eye, I saw our friend Cassie discreetly pull out her phone, angling it toward the confrontation. I couldn't blame her. If I weren't living this nightmare, I'd probably think it was prime social media material too. James moved to take the microphone from his mother, but she stepped back, clutching it tightly. "Don't you see what she's done to you?" she asked him, desperation creeping into her voice. "She's turned you against your own mother." "No one's turned me against you except you," James replied, his voice low and tight with anger. "Now please, give me the mic and go sit down." For a moment, Diane looked genuinely shocked, as if she couldn't believe her son would speak to her this way. Then her expression transformed into something calculating. She glanced at the anniversary cake, sitting, pristine on a table nearby. "You know what?" she said, suddenly calm. "You're right. This is your anniversary. We should be celebrating." Before anyone could react, she set down the microphone and strode purposefully toward the cake table. "Let's have some cake, shall we?" I barely had time to register her intent, before she was lifting the 3-tier cake, all 15 pounds of it, and pivoting toward me. "Diane, don't..." I started, but it was too late. With surprising strength, she thrust the entire cake forward, directly into my face and chest. Vanilla buttercream and cake layers exploded against me, coating my dress, face, and hair in sticky sweetness. The porcelain cake stand clattered to the ground, miraculously unbroken. Through the frosting obscuring my vision, I heard gasps, then a few nervous titters, quickly silenced. I felt the cold cream sliding down my neck, into my dress, ruining everything it touched. "Now that," Diane announced into the shocked silence, "is how you cut a cake." Someone handed me a napkin. As I wiped buttercream from my eyes, I saw James's face, a mask of shock and horror and something else. Something I'd never seen directed at his mother before. Rage. Time seemed to slow as I stood there, cake dripping from my hair onto the shoulders of my ruined dress. The garden lights, which had made everything look so magical just minutes ago, now felt like spotlights exposing my humiliation for all to see. In the silence that followed, I could hear the distant sound of a neighbor's wind chimes and someone's uncomfortable cough. The first voice to break the silence was my mother's. "Emma, honey, let's get you cleaned up." Her tone was gentle but strained as she moved toward me with a stack of napkins. But something inside me had shifted. A lifetime of accommodating difficult people, of swallowing my words to keep the peace, of shrinking myself to make others comfortable. All of it crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. I didn't move. "Emma?" James approached cautiously, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "Let's go inside and..." I raised my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. With deliberate slowness, I wiped enough frosting from my eyes to see clearly, then squared my shoulders and looked directly at Diane. She stood with a triumphant smirk, clearly expecting me to run away in tears. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm not going anywhere. I picked up the microphone that had been abandoned on the edge of the platform. The feedback squealed briefly before settling into a low hum. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, I began, hearing the strange calm in my voice as if it belonged to someone else. This isn't exactly how I pictured our anniversary celebration ending, but I think it's fitting in a way. Confused, murmurs rippled through the gathering. James hovered uncertainly at my side, his expression caught between concern for me and anger at his mother. For the past 3 years, I continued, I've tried everything to earn Diane's approval. I've changed how I dress, monitored what I say, rearranged holidays, and pretended not to notice when she dismisses my career, my family, and my contributions to her son's life. Diane's smirk faltered. Now, Emma, there's no need to make a scene. A scene? I laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even me. You just demanded our house and threw a wedding cake at me. I think we're well past worrying about scenes, Diane. A few nervous chuckles came from the audience. I noticed my sister Olivia subtly giving me a thumbs up from beside the buffet table. But you know what? I should thank you, I said, turning back to Diane. Because until tonight, I wasn't sure if anyone else saw what was happening. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive or imagining things. But now everyone here has witnessed exactly what I've been dealing with since the day we met. I gestured to our friends and family, many of whom were now watching with expressions ranging from shock to something that looked suspiciously like admiration. You asked me to prove my love for James by giving you our home. I wiped another streak of frosting from my cheek. Let me tell you about love, Diane. Love isn't about grand gestures or property deeds. It's about the everyday choices we make. I turned to look at James, whose eyes had never left my face. It's about supporting your partner when they work late because a case is important to them. It's about making coffee just the way they like it without being asked. It's about holding them when they're stressed about work, even if you're exhausted from teaching 4th graders all day. James reached out and took my frosting-covered hand, squeezing it gently. When I met your son, I was already established in my career. I had bought this house with the inheritance my grandmother left me, a woman who taught 2nd grade for 40 years and saved every penny because education was her passion, just as it's mine. Diane's face had lost some of its color, but her chin remained stubbornly raised. When James and I decided to get married, I put half the house in his name because that's what partners do. Not because anyone demanded it, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because I wanted to build a life with him. I paused, letting my gaze move across the faces of our guests. I've given a lot to this relationship. I've supported James through his law school debt, his first big case, his promotion to junior partner. I've rearranged my schedule countless times to attend Morgan family functions. I've listened to criticism about everything from my haircut to my casserole recipe without complaint. A sudden gust of wind sent the string lights swaying, casting moving shadows across the yard. In that shifting light, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The expressions on the faces of James's extended family. His Aunt Patricia, Diane's own sister, was nodding slightly. His cousin Mark looked embarrassed, staring into his wine glass. Even Diane's best friend Eleanor seemed uncomfortable. This wasn't just about me. They had all witnessed Diane's behavior before. Diane, you demanded to know what I've sacrificed for your son. The truth is, I haven't seen them as sacrifices because that's not how love works. But if you want to talk about contribution and family legacy, let's be clear about one thing. I took a deep breath. This house that you so desperately want, it's legally in my name. I bought it before I met James. The down payment came from my grandmother's life savings. The mortgage payments come from my teaching salary. And while James and I share everything now as partners, I need you to understand something. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice slightly, though the microphone still carried it across the yard. You have no claim to it. Not legally, not morally, not in any way that matters. And after tonight, you have no claim to my patience or my silence either. A flash of something, was it fear, crossed Diane's face before she recovered. "How dare you speak to me like this?" she hissed. "James, are you going to let her talk to your mother this way?" I felt James's hand tighten around mine, but before he could speak, I continued. "I'm not finished. For 3 years, I've watched you manipulate your son with guilt, tears, and selective memory. I've watched you rewrite history to cast yourself as the perpetual victim. I've stayed quiet because I thought that's what a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, would do." My voice grew stronger with each word. But I realize now that being good doesn't mean being silent. Sometimes being good means standing up and saying enough. I turned to face our guests directly. "I'm sorry that our celebration ended this way. There's takeaway containers by the door. Please help yourselves to the food. The night's obviously over, but I want you all to know that James and I appreciate you coming." Then I turned back to Diane, who stood frozen, her red dress now spattered with vanilla frosting, her carefully constructed image crumbling under the weight of public exposure. "As for you, Diane, I think it's time for you to leave. And just so we're perfectly clear." I removed the spare key we kept for her from my purse and held it up. "I'll be changing the locks tomorrow. If you want to see your son, you'll need to call first. And you'll need to apologize, not just to me, but to everyone who witnessed your behavior tonight." A flicker of panic crossed her face. "James," she appealed, reaching for her son. "You can't let her do this. I'm your mother." The garden fell silent again, as all eyes turned to James. This was his moment, the crossroads I'd feared since we'd first gotten serious. Would he stand with me, or would the lifetime of manipulation win out? James looked at his mother for a long moment, then gently released my hand and stepped forward. He took the spare key from my fingers and placed it in his pocket. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I love you. You raised me, and I'll always be grateful for that. But what you did tonight was unforgivable. I was just—" she began, but he shook his head. "No, there's no excuse. None." His voice broke slightly. "Emma is my wife. She's my partner and my best friend. When you attack her, you attack me. When you disrespect her, you disrespect me." He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders in a gesture so similar to what I'd done moments before that I felt a surge of love for him. "I think it's best if you go home now. We can talk tomorrow, but things are going to be different. I won't choose between you, but I won't allow this behavior either." Diane's face crumpled, not in genuine remorse, but in the theatrical display I'd seen many times before, the performance designed to make James feel guilty and protective. "My own son," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Turning against me, after everything I've done." But for the first time, it didn't work. James simply turned away, putting his arm around my shoulder and guiding me toward the house. "Let's get you cleaned up," he murmured. As we walked away, I heard Diane's voice rise, calling after us, making one last desperate attempt to regain control. "This isn't over! You can't cut me out! James! James!" But the sliding glass door closed behind us, muffling her cries. In our kitchen, under the harsh fluorescent light, James and I looked at each other, me covered in cake, him with frosting transferred from my dress to his suit. And despite everything, we burst into unexpected laughter. "I'm so sorry," he said when our laughter subsided, his face growing serious. "I had no idea she would. I never thought." I reached up to touch his face, leaving a smear of buttercream on his cheek. "I know. What you said out there." He searched my eyes. "You were incredible. I should have stood up to her years ago." "We both should have," I admitted. But we're doing it now, together. Outside, we could hear our friends helping clean up, Diane's car starting and driving away, the normal sounds of life continuing despite the dramatic interruption. Tomorrow, there would be consequences to face, relationships to rebuild, boundaries to establish. But tonight, in this moment, something fundamental had changed. I no longer felt like I was fighting for a place in my own marriage. For the first time since I'd met Diane Morgan, I was standing on solid ground. By the time we emerged from the bathroom, me in a hastily borrowed sundress from my sister and James in a clean t-shirt, most of our guests had tactfully departed. Only our closest friends and my immediate family remained, quietly stacking chairs and gathering discarded plates. "You don't have to do that," I protested weakly as my college roommate Lisa folded a tablecloth. "Shut up and let us help," she replied with a gentle smile. Besides, I wouldn't miss the after-party debrief for anything. My father approached, awkwardly patting James on the shoulder. "You two holding up okay?" James nodded, his face still, tight with emotion. "Mr. Campbell, I'm so sorry about what happened. I never thought my mother would—" "Son," my dad interrupted. "The only person who needs to apologize is your mother, and she's got a lot of apologizing to do." From the driveway came the sound of a car engine starting, then stopping. We turned, to see Diane's silver Lexus still parked where she'd left it. She hadn't left after all. "Oh God," James muttered. "I thought she'd gone." We watched as Diane emerged from her car and marched back toward our yard, her red dress now rumpled, her carefully styled hair beginning to fray at the edges. The confident swagger of earlier was gone, replaced by a desperate energy that made her movements jerky and unpredictable. "She's coming back," Lisa whispered unnecessarily. James started toward the gate to intercept his mother, but I placed a hand on his arm. "No. Let her come." Something told me this confrontation needed to happen with witnesses. As Diane pushed through the gate, I could see she'd been crying, or trying to. Her mascara was smudged in a way that suggested she'd rubbed at her eyes, but produced few actual tears. "James," she called, ignoring everyone else. "We need to talk. Alone." My husband stood his ground. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Emma and our friends." Diane's gaze darted around the yard, taking in the small group of people who had paused in their cleanup efforts to watch. For a woman who had always performed for an audience, being observed in her moment of desperation seemed to unnerve her. "This is family business," she insisted, her voice rising. "These people have no right." "These people," James interrupted, "are our friends and Emma's family. They're here because they care about us. And after what you did tonight, you don't get to dictate the terms of any conversation." I watched something shift in Diane's expression, a momentary fracture in her composure as she realized her usual tactics weren't working. For as long as I'd known her, Diane had maintained control through a careful balance of manipulation, guilt, and occasional strategic displays of vulnerability. But tonight, that playbook had failed her. "Fine," she said, straightening her shoulders. "If you want to humiliate me in front of an audience, that's your choice. But remember, I raised you better than this." My sister Olivia made a small noise that sounded suspiciously like a snort. Diane's head whipped toward her. "Something funny?" she snapped. Olivia, never one to back down, shrugged. "Just wondering if raising him better included teaching him to let his mother publicly humiliate his wife and demand their house. Seems like a weird parenting strategy." "You have no idea what you're talking about," Diane hissed. "I've sacrificed everything for my son." "Mom," James said, his voice firm, but not unkind. "Why are you here? What do you want?" For a moment, Diane seemed genuinely confused by the question, as if the answer should be obvious. "I want things back the way they were. Before she jabbed a finger in my direction. turned you against me." James shook his head. "Emma didn't turn me against you. You did that yourself when you demanded our house and threw a cake at my wife." "It was just a moment of frustration," Diane protested. "You know how I get when I feel cornered." "Cornered?" I couldn't help myself. "You were giving a toast at our anniversary party. No one was attacking you." "You've never understood," Diane said, turning to face me fully for the first time. "Everything I've done, every sacrifice, every hard decision, has been to secure James's future, to make sure he has the legacy his father would have wanted for him." "By taking our house?" James asked incredulously. "It's not about the house," Diane nearly shouted. "It's about respect. It's about acknowledging what I deserve after raising you alone, after giving up my own dreams so you could have yours." The garden fell silent. Even the neighborhood sounds seemed to pause as we all absorbed the naked truth that had finally emerged. This had never been about me, or even about James, not really. It was about Diane's resentment of her own life, choices, her own sacrifices that no one had asked her to make. "Mom," James said quietly, "I appreciate everything you did for me growing up. But I'm an adult now, with my own family, my own partner. We need to redefine our relationship." "Redefine?" Diane's voice rose again. "What does that mean?" "It means boundaries," I said, stepping forward to stand beside my husband. "It means you call before visiting. It means you speak to me with respect. It means no more criticism of our life choices or passive-aggressive comments about my career or family." Diane looked from James to me and back again, searching for a crack in our united front. Finding none, she tried a new approach, her voice softening into the wounded mother tone I'd heard her use countless times before. "James, sweetheart, I know you're upset right now, and rightfully so. I shouldn't have lost my temper." She dabbed at her eyes, though I noticed they remained conspicuously dry. "But you know how much I love you, how much I only want what's best for you." In the past, this performance would have worked. James would have softened, made excuses for her behavior, persuaded me to forgive and forget for the sake of family, harmony. But tonight was different. Tonight, we had witnesses. Tonight, the mask had slipped too far to be easily repositioned. "I know you love me, Mom," James said. "But loving someone doesn't mean controlling them. And it definitely doesn't mean attacking their spouse." Diane's face hardened again, her features twisting with frustration as she realized her usual playbook wasn't working. "So that's it? After everything I've done for you, you're choosing her over me?" "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone," James replied calmly. "I'm choosing healthy relationships. I'm choosing respect. And right now, you're not offering either." A visible tremor ran through Diane's body. Her gaze darted around the yard, seeking an ally and finding none. Even in the dim, evening light, I could see the color draining from her face as the reality of her situation sank in. "I see." Her voice had gone cold. "Well, if that's how you feel, perhaps I should leave." She turned abruptly, nearly stumbling on the uneven grass, and headed toward the gate. But before she reached it, she paused, turning back for one final attempt. "James," she called, her voice breaking. "Please, don't do this to me." The raw desperation in her tone made my heart twist despite everything. But James stood firm. "I'm not doing anything to you, Mom. I'm just asking you to respect my marriage. When you're ready to do that, we'll talk." Something in Diane seemed to collapse then, not physically, but something fundamental in her bearing, in the rigid control she'd maintained over herself and everyone around her for so long. Her shoulders slumped, her carefully curated image of sophistication and strength evaporating in an instant. She sank onto one of the few remaining chairs, her red dress pooling around her like spilled wine. There was something almost tragic about her in that moment. A woman who had defined herself entirely through her relationship to her son, now facing the reality that he had built a life beyond her control. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered, more to herself than to us. No one answered. The question hung in the air, unanswerable because it revealed a truth too painful to acknowledge. Diane had no idea who she was outside her role as James's mother. As we watched in uncomfortable silence, she began to cry. Real tears this time, not the performative kind she'd perfected over the years. They tracked mascara down her cheeks in dark rivers, her carefully applied makeup dissolving along with the last vestiges of her power. In that moment, despite everything, I felt a flicker of compassion for her. Not enough to forget what she'd done, but enough to recognize the broken human beneath the manipulative exterior. James must have felt it too, because he moved to stand, beside her chair, not touching her but close enough to offer a presence. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here. But things have to change. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge his words. She simply sat there, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. A queen deposed, a story unraveling, a woman facing the consequences of her actions perhaps for the first time in her adult life. The week following our anniversary disaster passed in, a blur of uncomfortable phone calls and text messages. Word had spread quickly through both sides of our family, with everyone from James's distant cousins to my great-aunt Mabel calling to check if the rumors were true. Yes, Diane had demanded our house. Yes, she had thrown a 3-tier cake at me. And yes, we were taking a break from contact with her. I always knew that woman had issues, my mother said when she stopped by with homemade lasagna, her standard crisis response. Remember how she criticized your wedding flowers? Who complains about peonies? Mom, please, I sighed, accepting the enormous casserole dish. This isn't about validating that Diane is difficult. We already knew that. I'm just saying it's about time you stood up to her. She bustled around our kitchen, opening drawers in search of serving utensils she didn't trust me to own. Your father and I were worried you'd spend your whole marriage walking on eggshells around that woman. As much as I appreciated the support, the constant rehashing was exhausting. Each retelling required reliving the humiliation, the anger, the pity I'd felt watching Diane crumble. James was having an even harder time. He'd taken a few days off work, something I'd never seen him do outside of planned vacations. Do you think I should call her? He asked on the third morning, staring into his untouched coffee mug. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, testament to the restless nights we'd both endured. That depends, I said carefully. Are you ready to hold the boundary we set? Because if you call her and then cave when she cries or gets angry... I won't cave, he interrupted. Then softer. I can't. Not after what she did to you. But I could see the conflict in his eyes. 32 years of conditioned responses don't disappear overnight, no matter how justified the rupture. She's called 17 times, he added, and texted about 50. Messages ranging from angry to apologetic to, well, take a look. He slid his phone across the kitchen island. I scrolled through the texts, wincing at their emotional whiplash. From I've always known she wasn't right for you to, I'm so sorry, darling, please forgive your foolish mother, to, if you don't call me back, I'll assume you're being kept from your phone. She's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, I observed, handing the phone back. Classic Diane. James nodded, a small, sad smile lifting the corner of his mouth. You know what's crazy? I've never seen it so clearly before. It's like all my life there's been this filter between me and her behavior, and now it's just gone. I reached across the island to squeeze his hand. That's actually a good thing, even though it hurts. Yeah. He squeezed back. I just keep thinking about all the times I let her get away with treating you badly. All the times I made excuses or asked you to be patient with her. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had, I reminded him. We both were. On the fourth day, we ventured out to the local coffee shop, needing a change of scenery from our house with its lingering reminders of the celebration gone wrong. We had just settled at a corner table when James froze, coffee cup halfway to, his lips. "What is it?" I asked, turning to follow his gaze. Near the entrance, thumbing through her phone with nervous energy, stood Diane's best friend Eleanor. She hadn't noticed us yet, but there was no easy escape route. "We could just leave," I suggested, already gathering my things. But James shook his head. "No, we're not the ones who did anything wrong." Before I could respond, Eleanor looked up and spotted us. She hesitated visibly before squaring her shoulders and approaching our table. "James, Emma," she said, her voice tight with awkwardness. "I thought you might be here. Diane mentioned you come here sometimes." The implication that she'd been sent as a reconnaissance mission hung in the air. "Hello, Eleanor," James replied coolly. "Can we help you with something?" She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her designer purse like a shield. "I just wanted to check on you both. After what happened," she trailed off, unable to find an appropriate euphemism for the disaster. "We're fine," I said, more curtly than I'd intended, taking some time to process everything. Eleanor nodded, then seemed to come to some internal decision. "Look, I'm not here to defend what Diane did. It was inexcusable. But I've been her friend for 20 years, and I've never seen her like this before." "Like what?" James asked warily. "Broken." Eleanor's voice dropped. "She's not eating, barely sleeping. She canceled the charity committee meeting, first time in 15 years. She just sits in her house with the curtains drawn, looking at old photos of you growing up." Despite everything, I felt a twinge of concern. Diane was many things: manipulative, controlling, selfish. But she was also human, and she was James's only living parent. "Has she seen a doctor?" I asked. Eleanor shook her head. "She won't. Says there's nothing wrong with her that her son's forgiveness wouldn't fix." She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. "I know you have every right to be angry. What she did was awful. But she's suffering, and I thought you should know." James stared into his coffee, his expression unreadable. "Thanks for telling us, Eleanor. But this isn't something that can be fixed with a quick apology and moving on. There are decades of patterns that need to change." "I understand." Eleanor adjusted her purse strap. For what it's worth, I told her as much. That if she wants you back in her life, she needs to get help. Professional help. The fact that even Diane's staunchest defender was suggesting therapy spoke volumes about how badly she'd crossed the line. After Eleanor left, we sat in silence, our coffee cooling untouched. "She's manipulating us through Eleanor," I finally said, voicing what we were both thinking. "Probably," James agreed, "but that doesn't mean Eleanor is wrong about her condition." I studied his face, noting the tension in his jaw, the worried crease between his eyebrows. "You want to check on her?" It wasn't a question. "Is that terrible?" he asked. "After everything she did?" I reached for his hand again. "It's human. She's your mom, James. Complicated, difficult, sometimes toxic, but still your mom." The next day, a Friday, a video of our anniversary confrontation appeared on social media. Someone, we suspected James's cousin Mark, who had been glued to his phone all evening, had captured the entire incident from Diane's demand to my final stand. The post had gone viral overnight, racking up thousands of comments and shares. Complete strangers were now weighing in on the most painful moment of our lives, variously calling me Cake Face Queen or Mother-in-Law Slayer, depending on their perspective. Hashtags like #TeamEmma and $Housegate trended briefly on Twitter. "I'm so sorry," my sister said when she called to warn us about the video. People are the worst. But strangely, the public exposure felt almost cathartic. There was no room for gaslighting when the evidence was there for everyone to see. No way for Diane to rewrite history or claim I had overreacted. The comments section beneath the video surprised me. Women from across the country shared their own stories of boundary-crushing in-laws, of standing up after years of silence, of the complicated grief that comes with cutting toxic ties. In their words, I found unexpected solidarity. Maybe some good will come from this mess after all, I mused to James as we scrolled through messages of support from strangers. Maybe, he agreed, though his voice lacked conviction. On Sunday morning, a full week after the incident, we were awakened by a gentle knock at our front door. James tensed beside me, both of us immediately thinking the same thing. Diane. "I'll get it," I said, pulling on a robe. But when I peered through the peephole, it wasn't my mother-in-law's face I saw, but a young courier holding a thick manila envelope. "Delivery for James and Emma Morgan," he announced when I opened the door. "What is it?" James asked, appearing behind me in sweatpants and a rumpled t-shirt. "No idea. Just asked to deliver it by 9 a.m. The courier handed over the envelope and departed with a polite nod. The return address bore the name of Diane's attorney, a detail that made both our stomachs sink. Was she suing us somehow? Trying to legally claim our house after all? With trembling fingers, James tore open the seal and extracted a bound document, along with a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "She's not suing us," he said after scanning the first page. It's an apology, and proof that she started therapy." I looked over his shoulder at the papers, a signed agreement with a respected psychologist in Boston, together with a notarized letter promising to attend weekly sessions for a minimum of 6 months. The note was brief, but direct. "James and Emma, words cannot express my remorse for my behavior. I have no excuse for what I did. For too long, I've allowed my fear of losing you, James, to justify controlling and hurtful actions. I see now how deeply I've damaged our relationship and how unfairly I've treated Emma from the beginning. I'm enclosing proof that I've begun working with Dr. Greenfield to address these issues. This is not a quick fix or an attempt to buy back your good graces, but the beginning of real work I should have done years ago. I understand if you need space and time. If you're ready to talk, I will listen without defending or deflecting. That's a promise I intend to keep. With sincere regret and hope for healing, Mom." We stared at the note in silence, both processing its unexpected sincerity. "Do you think she means it?" I finally asked. James reread the note, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know. It's different from her usual apologies. No but statements. No subtle blame shifting." He looked up at me. "What do you think?" I considered my response carefully. This wasn't just about me and my hurt feelings. This was about a family wound that had been festering for years before I entered the picture. "I think," I said slowly, "that real change takes time and consistent effort. One note and a therapy appointment don't erase what happened." I paused, weighing my next words. "But it's a start. A better start than I expected, honestly." James nodded, folding the note and slipping it back into the envelope. "We don't have to decide anything today." He was right. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation or continued distance, would unfold in its own time. For now, it was enough to know that something fundamental had shifted. Not just in our relationship with Diane, but in our marriage itself. As we moved through our quiet Sunday morning routine, making coffee, reading the news, planning the week ahead, I felt a new steadiness between us. We had faced a storm together and emerged stronger, our boundaries clearer, our commitment to each other's well-being reinforced. 3 months after what we now called simply the incident, Autumn had transformed our neighborhood. Maple leaves carpeted our front yard in shades of burnt orange and crimson, and the morning air carried the distinct chill of a New England October. Life had settled into a new rhythm, different, sometimes uncertain, but ultimately steadier than before. James and I had made good on our promise to change the locks, though the symbolic gesture had become less important as the weeks passed. We'd also taken steps to shore up other boundaries in our lives. I'd finally declined the extra committee work at school that had been stretching me too thin. James had negotiated a more reasonable caseload at the firm. Small changes, but meaningful ones. As for Diane, we'd maintained our distance while cautiously monitoring her progress through occasional updates from Eleanor and James's Aunt Patricia. The reports were surprisingly consistent. Diane was attending her therapy sessions without fail. She had stepped back from 3 of her 5 charity committees. She had even begun taking an art class at the community center, something she'd wanted to do decades ago before marriage and motherhood had taken precedence. She used to paint when I was very little, James told me one evening as we sorted through old family photos he'd retrieved from the attic. I barely remember it, but there used to be canvases leaning against the walls in our old house in Cambridge. They disappeared after Dad died. I studied a faded photograph of a much younger Diane, paintbrush in hand, smiling with an openness I'd never witnessed in person. She looks happy here. She was, I think, before everything fell apart with Dad's business. James sighed, tracing the edge of the photo with his fingertip. I wonder sometimes if that's when she started becoming so controlling, when everything else in her life felt out of control. Understanding Diane's behavior didn't excuse it, but it offered context that made compassion easier to access. The woman who had thrown a cake at me had been shaped by her own traumas and losses, her own unfulfilled dreams and fears. On a crisp Saturday morning in late October, James received a text from his mother, the first direct communication since her formal apology letter. It was simple and restrained. "I'm having an exhibition of my paintings at the community center, next Friday at 7 p.m. No pressure at all, but you would both be welcome if you felt comfortable attending." James showed me the message over breakfast, his expression a mixture of hope and wariness. "What do you think?" I considered the question carefully. The old Emma might have automatically said yes to keep the peace, swallowing her own discomfort for the sake of family harmony. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I think," I said slowly, "that it depends on what you want, and what I want, not just what would make her happy." James nodded, understanding the change in my perspective. "I'd like to see her work. I'm curious. About this part of her I never really knew. But I won't go without you. And I won't go if you're only agreeing to make me happy." The fact that he recognized the potential for slipping back into old patterns gave me confidence. "Let's sleep on it," I suggested. "See how we feel midweek." By Wednesday, after honest conversations about our expectations and boundaries, we decided to attend, with conditions. We would arrive shortly after the start time, stay for no more than an hour, and leave together regardless of how things went. We would be cordial, but not effusive. And most importantly, we would prioritize each other's comfort over Diane's expectations. Friday evening arrived with light rain that glazed the streets and turned the fallen leaves into a slippery mosaic. I changed outfits 3 times, struggling to find something that struck the right balance, polished enough to show respect for the occasion, casual enough to signal that this wasn't a full reconciliation. "You look great," James assured me as I frowned at my reflection. "And remember, we can leave anytime." The community center was a converted Victorian mansion near Davis Square, its rooms now dedicated to various arts programs and community gatherings. As we approached the entrance, I felt my pulse quicken, my body remembering the stress of previous encounters with my mother-in-law. "Ready?" James asked, squeezing my hand. "As I'll ever be," I replied, summoning a smile that felt only slightly forced. Inside, The exhibition space buzzed with quiet conversation. About 30 people milled about, wine glasses in hand, examining the artwork displayed on temporary walls. It took me a moment to register that the vibrant canvases surrounding abstract explosions of color, impressionistic landscapes, studies of light falling through windows, were Diane's work. "They're actually really good," I whispered to James, genuinely surprised. I had expected competent hobby work, not this evidence of genuine talent and emotional depth. "I had no idea," he murmured back, his gaze fixed on a particularly striking painting of a solitary figure standing at the edge of what appeared to be a stormy sea. We circulated slowly, keeping to ourselves as we absorbed this unexpected side of Diane. I was studying a small canvas of intertwined trees when I sensed a presence beside me. "That one's about family," Diane said quietly. "How roots become entangled over time, supporting each other even when it looks messy from the outside." I turned to face her, preparing myself for the usual tension. But the woman standing before me looked subtly different from the Diane I remembered. Her hair was styled more simply, her outfit elegant but less ostentatious. The most noticeable change, though, was in her eyes. They held a wariness and humility I'd never seen before. "It's beautiful," I said honestly. "I didn't know you were an artist." "Neither did I, for a long time." She glanced over my shoulder at James, who was speaking with an elderly couple nearby. "Thank you both for coming. I wasn't sure you would." There was no accusation in her tone, no manipulative undertone, just a simple acknowledgement of our strained circumstances. "I wasn't sure we would either," I admitted, deciding that honesty was the only viable path forward. A small, sad smile crossed her face. "That's fair." She hesitated, then added, "My therapist suggested I focus on re-establishing my own identity outside of being James's mother. These paintings are part of that process." The direct mention of therapy surprised me. The old Diane would have considered it shameful, a weakness to be hidden at all costs. "How's that going?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Harder than I expected." She gazed at her painting. "It's been painful, looking at how my fear of abandonment turned me into someone who pushed people away." She met my eyes directly. Someone who hurt people who didn't deserve it. The moment felt fragile, balanced on a knife's edge between genuine connection and old patterns. I chose my response carefully. "Healing takes time," I said, remembering what my own therapist had told me when I'd started unpacking my tendency to prioritize peace over self-respect. "For everyone involved." Diane nodded, seeming to understand the layers in my response. "I'm trying to be patient with the process. Some days are better than others." James approached then, creating a triangle of cautious energy between us. "Hi, Mom," he said, leaning in for a brief, somewhat awkward hug. "The exhibition is impressive. I had no idea you were so talented." "Thank you," she replied, and I noted how she resisted the urge to either dismiss the compliment or expand it into self-congratulation, both habits of the past. "How are things at the firm?" The three of us moved into safer conversational territory. Work, the weather, the community center's renovation. No mention was made of the incident or its aftermath, though it hovered in the background of every exchange. There were uncomfortable pauses and moments when old triggers nearly activated, but we navigated them with a new awareness. After about 40 minutes, James and I exchanged a glance, our prearranged signal that we were ready to leave. "We should get going," he told his mother. "Early start tomorrow. But the exhibition is really wonderful, Mom. I'm proud of you for doing this." A flicker of disappointment crossed Diane's face, quickly masked. "Of course. Thank you both for making the time to come." As we prepared to leave, she hesitated, then added, "I'm cooking Thanksgiving dinner at my house next month. just something small. If you'd like to join me, you'd be welcome. But I completely understand if it's too soon. The old Diane would have leveraged the holiday for maximum guilt. This invitation, with its explicit acknowledgement that we might not be ready, felt like another small step in her evolution. James glanced at me, leaving the decision visibly in my hands. Another change from our previous dynamic. We already have plans with my family in Concord, I said, which was true. But thank you for the invitation. If she was disappointed, she didn't show it. Of course. Another time, perhaps. As we walked to our car in the light rain, James was quieter than usual, his face thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" I asked, once we were inside with the heater running. "That I don't know how to feel," he admitted. "Part of me wants to believe she's really changing. Another part is waiting for the other shoe to drop." I reached over to take his hand. "Both of those feelings make sense. We don't have to decide everything tonight." He nodded, squeezing my fingers gratefully. "I'm glad we came, though. Are you?" I considered the evening, the awkwardness, the tentative steps toward something new, the reminder that people are always more complex than our perception of them. "Yes," I said. "I am." As we drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Somerville, past triple-deckers with glowing windows and storefronts closing for the night, I reflected on the month since our anniversary. The public humiliation had faded into a strange kind of blessing, a breaking point that forced change where gentle pressure had failed. Our house, once the object of Diane's demand, had become more truly ours in the aftermath. We'd repainted the living room, replaced the cake-stained backyard tablecloths, reclaimed spaces that had been temporarily tainted by conflict. Home felt like home again. The future with Diane remained uncertain. Real healing couldn't be rushed or forced. But for the first time, I could imagine a relationship with my mother-in-law that wasn't defined by tension and power struggles. A relationship based on mutual respect rather than reluctant tolerance. As we pulled into our driveway, the porch light welcoming us home, James reached over and touched my cheek gently. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up. On me, on us, for being stronger than I knew how to be." I leaned into his touch, thinking of all we'd weathered together. That's what partnership is. Sometimes I'm the strong one. Sometimes you are. We sat there for a moment longer, rain pattering on the roof of our car. The house, our house, waiting just steps away. Whatever came next, whatever relationship evolved with Diane, we would face it together, eyes open, boundaries intact. The crisis that had threatened to break us had instead revealed our strength, not just mine in standing up to Diane, but ours as a couple. And in that revelation lay the promise of all the years ahead, a promise of honest communication, mutual support, and the quiet courage to protect what mattered most. Our love, our partnership, our shared life. In the end, that was worth far more than any house, any approval, any false peace built on silence. It was worth everything.